What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jay Rich here to bring you some Thanksgiving NFL props over on Prizepicks. Hope you guys are enjoying your Thanksgiving. Wanted to wish you all before we get into the props. I'm kind of just going to walk you through my process. We're going to go over pretty much every game, every prop, discuss what I may like or not like about it. I have a few different things that I have pulled up on the side here that I may reference as we go through this. So let's just dive into it, take our time, go through it. Hope you all enjoy your Thanksgiving though, but let's dive into the props right now. So starting over with Josh Allen, the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. Looking at him right now, 285 on Prizepicks. His line on DK is 286.5, and I'm seeing him projected for well over 300 yards in this one. And so I'm looking at him like, Josh Allen last week against Cleveland, 197. The Lions, how badly does he really need to go hard in this one? Lions have a terrible rush defense. They will allow a lot of yards through the air. We know that Josh Allen probably looking to bounce back after last week. You know, they still won the game, so nothing to be mad about. It is a short week as well. You know, they played in Detroit on Sunday on the road, and they're playing in Detroit again today. I don't know, man. It's tough. Josh Allen is a guy I can't really figure out this week. It's a situation that I want to take. The 285 just feels like an easy smash over with how bad that Detroit defense is. And then on the other side, talk about Jared Goff. Like, Jared Goff probably going to be playing catch-up in this one. I don't think that Detroit Lions defense is going to hold down anybody. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, a lot of people are betting the overs for both those guys. That's why if you like the overs for Gabe Davis, you like the over Stephon Diggs, you kind of have to like the over for Josh Allen. And on the other side of the game script, you got Jared Goff. Is he going to be able to put up yards and points on this Buffalo Bills defense? Maybe, right? We right now have him projected for an under. He is projected on Prizepicks, as you see here, 237.5. On DK, though, 246.5. So a pretty big variance there. A 9-yard difference between DraftKings and Prizepicks. So depending on how you feel about it, I'm kind of still leaning the under, though. I don't think he's necessarily going to put up a ton of yards. So that's kind of starting with that matchup and kind of how those guys look. And then getting into the main game of the day, Daniel Jones versus Dak Prescott. I'm kind of leaning, obviously, the Cowboys side. They could win big. The Giants' offensive line is not looking very good. I'm looking at Daniel Jones, and I'm like, man, I know you threw for 300 last week, but I'm not there yet, Danny. I'm not there yet. This Cowboys defense is going to be after you. And it's not that I want the under because I think it's just a little too low. We actually have them projected for right around there. Right at 189 is what I'm seeing projections-wise. Kind of like a medium projection that we're seeing. 190 on Prizepicks, 195 on DraftKings. It's going to be close. But this game could be ugly. It could be ugly. I mean, everyone's projecting the Cowboys to win big, and there's a stat out there that the Cowboys don't cover on Thanksgiving and don't cover very often. And so there's maybe some hope Saquon has a good game, and, you know, the Giants obviously want to come in here and play well. But, you know, you think about what happened last week and them losing to Detroit. Were they looking past Detroit a little bit, prepping for this Cowboys game? Potentially. And so there is hope that maybe they do get things together, but both teams obviously on a short week. I just expect Dallas to run the hell out of the ball, and that's why part of me is kind of looking at a Dak passing under. Are they going to put up 40 points on this defense? Maybe, maybe not. Depends how they're feeling that day, I guess. We know Tony Pollard's going to get the rock. We know Zeke's going to be heavily involved. I'm kind of looking at a Dak under 252.5 on Prizepicks, 256.5 on DraftKings. We're seeing him projected for anywhere around like 235 to 240. So again, kind of the same type of game script that we saw last week, but maybe without the 60-yard touchdown to Tony Pollard. A lot of people like CeeDee Lamb. It's just I'm not all the way there on this one. I think I'd probably be staying away from it. If anything, though, I would be going under. And then talking about Mac Jones, Kirk Cousins. I mean, Kirk Cousins in primetime, good luck. They're playing at 8:30, so we'll see what he looks like. Obviously, Jefferson's going to get doubled a lot, probably, from Bill Belichick's defense. Mac Jones, what is he going to be able to do? Yeah, he put up some yards on the Jets defense. Minnesota Vikings defense isn't much better, so he could be fine, but I expect them to run the ball. I expect this game's going to be close. Only a 2.5, 3-point spread, depending on where you look. So maybe a close game, slow. I don't expect the Vikings to get out far ahead. What I am looking at, though, and I will get into this a little bit, is that the tight end matchups in a couple of these games do look really good. But as far as the quarterbacks, I'm not really sold on anybody. You could go Josh Allen over. I don't hate it. Jared Goff, I'm kind of iffy on. Dak under is probably where I'm leaning. And then Kirk and Mac, I'm staying away from. I have no interest in either of those guys. I'm not seeing a ton of value, especially about 6 yards or so, depending on what we're looking at. The biggest one right now is Josh Allen. We have him projected for about 320 yards. Again, it's health, right? And how does he look? And he had 300 yards versus Minnesota, but he kind of had to throw a lot in that game. The rest are iffy. I think you could go Dak under, Josh Allen over, and the rest I'm kind of staying away from, but not a lot of lines that I really love out there. Then get into the rushing. Devin Singletary at 60 is very intriguing. We know the Lions' rush defense is not good, so that is a potential opportunity. But we're actually seeing it a little bit projected to the under. People are not expecting a ton from Singletary, even though we know that he can get the rock, and he's been getting more and more carries. I believe he's averaging around 14 carries a game, where he's been in like the 10 to 11 range for the past little bit. But we're seeing him still only projected for around 50 yards, 60.5 on Prizepicks, and 58.5 on DraftKings. So DraftKings is actually projecting him to be a little bit lower. So if you do like the under for Singletary, kind of like the way that I'm leaning a little bit, I expect, if you're going to go the narrative of a heavy pass script for the Buffalo Bills, kind of a get-right game for their offense as a whole, get-right game for Josh Allen in a good spot where they can just blow the doors off of Detroit, which we have seen a couple times in the past on Thanksgiving. So we'll see what happens there, but I do think there is some opportunity for them in this matchup. So then you talk about Singletary probably going under. Then you go over to Josh Allen. Do I expect him to run a lot? Oh, man, I don't know. 42.5. I'm like, I don't. He's been pretty good, but I don't know if I want to bet on it. 7 yards last week, but 64 versus Minnesota. Again, the thing is that this game probably won't be very competitive. Like, I don't expect it to be very competitive. And so if you're expecting a non-competitive game, a game where they probably blow out the opponent, where, again, Josh Allen is already kind of injured, that UCL not feeling so great, I don't know how much you're going to have to run in this one. That offensive line is very good. The pass rush for Detroit has its moments, but overall, probably not that strong versus Buffalo Bills' great offensive line. So Josh Allen probably stands back there and deals the whole game, or they hand it off to Singletary, hand it off to Cook, hand it off to whoever they want, and they get yards on the ground that way. I don't know how much running Josh Allen's going to have to do in this one, so I'm kind of leaning under, but it's not one I'd probably touch overall. Jamal Williams, 54.5 rush yards. I don't know if I'd go there. I mean, he only had 64 against the Giants, and he had 3 goddamn touchdowns, so you might as well go for the fantasy score there. I believe he's leading the league in rushing touchdowns, or he's second in the league in rushing touchdowns, so you definitely would want to target the fantasy score in that department. You look at Dak Prescott, he looks okay. I probably wouldn't touch his rushing yards again. The Giants' offensive or defensive front is talented. How much pressure they're going to get on Prescott, we're going to see. It's not one I'd really go after too hard. Saquon Barkley is definitely an interesting spot. He's going to probably struggle again. You saw what the Lions did last week to him. They really just bottled him up, and I think you do the same thing if you're the Cowboys this week. You just focus in on Saquon Barkley. Don't let him go anywhere. Don't let him have any big plays, and then you just force Daniel Jones to beat you. And we've seen in the past, seen it last week, Daniel Jones isn't really capable of doing that very often, and so if you're a Cowboys defensive coordinator, that's what you do. You stop Saquon Barkley, and we've seen the past 2 of 3 weeks, his explosive run rate is down a little bit. He's getting a lot of carries still, but he hasn't been able to do as much with them. But on prime time, you never know, man. Saquon Barkley may show up, but I'm definitely leaning under over there. We have him projected for around 87 yards, which feels a little generous based on what we're seeing. I don't know if I'm really buying into that. I don't think the game script's going to be there, especially if I'm playing the game that the Cowboys kind of blow out the Giants a little bit, or the game's not as close as people were kind of expecting. I think that 87 is probably a little generous. 73 definitely generous. It is 72.5 on DraftKings. So Prizepicks and DraftKings are kind of in lockstep on that projection overall. And then let's get into the guys everyone wants to talk about, Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott, only 48.5 rushing yards. We saw him go for 42 last week, but since before that, he has been going way over. I do think this could be a spot for Zeke Elliott to have a good game. He may not have as much work as we're expecting, but we do have him projected for around 54 yards. Now, DraftKings does have him for 44.5, so more value over on DraftKings if you did want to take a bet over there. But I think Prizepicks is in a better spot at 48.5. I think he should be right around that 50-yard mark. We have seen teams able to rush on the Cowboys. Obviously, or on the Giants. We saw last week that the Lions did a great job with that. They used the passing game effectively. They ran the ball fairly well. They played good defense, and they got a W versus the Giants on the road. Now the Giants got to come to Dallas, and in Dallas, the Cowboys play much better. They score more points. Zeke Elliott will be fired up. The crowd will be fired up. I think, with the injury to Zeke, he may be limited a little bit, but 54 yards is very reasonable versus Tony Pollard, who's all the way up at 61 or 66.5 on Prizepicks, 61.5 on DraftKings. This is just, I get it, man. It's just a little high for me. Last week it was around 42. They bumped it to 54. Now they're all the way up at 66.5. I think I'm at a fade at this point. I just don't know if I can go there. DraftKings has him at 61.5 right now. They may have bumped it up since, but right when I pulled the lines at 61.5, obviously you see here Tony Pollard 66.5. We've been projected for around 72. I just don't like the value. I'd rather take the value on Zeke. Zeke, I know he's kind of a plotter. He's not going to get a ton on the ground, but if you're just talking about pure value, I think that getting Zeke below Pollard, which how often do we ever see that? Almost never. I think I would just go that route because Zeke can always bust off a 10-yard run and kind of work his way there. We know he's going to be the short yardage back. If you wanted to go after the fantasy score, we can go take a look at that very quickly, but I would have to imagine that Zeke's fantasy score is pretty high because his touchdowns is probably pretty low right now. So you see, yeah, 10.5 for Zeke, and then you look at Pollard. He's probably down here. Where is Tony Pollard? Okay. Oh, 50. Okay, see, that to me is wild. You see Tony Pollard at 15, and I get he's the receiving back, 6 catches, 100 yards, touchdown, but Zeke's probably going to get in the end zone. He's hit that each of the last 3 weeks. This is the play you want to make. If you want to make a play on Zeke Elliott, 40 yards, bet on the touchdown, 10.5 is good money. If you want to take the over on the yards, I think that's fine. He may catch a pass or two, not expecting a lot in the receiving game from Zeke. But you look at that discrepancy. I understand Tony Pollard's a more talented back. He will get his work, but Zeke's probably going to find the end zone. So if I'm betting on someone to find the end zone, it's going to be Zeke Elliott. It's not going to be Tony Pollard. And knowing that you have to get 5 or 4.5 more points on Prizepicks for that fantasy score, I'd be rolling with Zeke there, no questions about it. And then going over to the Minnesota and New England game, Ramondre at 59.5 is actually pretty reasonable. He didn't have a great game against the Jets, but the defense for the Minnesota Vikings isn't quite as good. Looking at the projections, again, DK has him for 58.5. We have him for around 63, so kind of washed there. Not a whole lot of value to extract. And then going over to Dalvin Cook, we actually have him projected for right around 85 rushing yards. And last week against Dallas, he was pretty good still on limited work. I expect a much more positive game script for Dalvin Cook in this one. A closer game, more competitive, allowing him to get more than I believe he only had 12 carries last game. So again, a spot where he can definitely go over. The Patriots defense against the run has been okay. Some games have been better than others, but Cook, you see, he's been kind of up and down. When he had the big game against Buffalo, a lot of that was on 180-yard runs. So you take that away from him, he goes under, or you make that a little bit more modest, he probably goes under in that one. You see, he's been under in 2 of the last 3 games, so it may be close. I think it's a little high for Cook, but we do have him projected for an over, so he could be in a good spot. And I don't hate it. I think that they're going to have to run the ball, protect Kirk from himself. Jefferson's going to be heavily doubled. They'll have to use creative ways to get him involved. And I think we see a lot of TJ Hawkinson in this one. TJ Hawkinson has been really great on that offense ever since coming over from Detroit. So I think it's another good spot for him to go over. Now, it's important to point out, if you haven't used your Jefferson Taco, make sure you use that over half a yard, free money. I believe it's maximum of $20. So make sure you take advantage of that because that will definitely be valuable. Your free square is great. What you want to pair that with is up to you, but not a bad option in my opinion. Stephon Diggs, we have projected for over 100 yards. I think he should go nuclear on this Detroit defense. They like to play a lot of man coverage. The best man beater on that defense is Stephon Diggs. 89.5 receiving yards. DraftKings has him at 91.5. We have him projected for over 110 yards. I think he can do that pretty easily. Like I talked about with Josh Allen, get right game for him. Great spot. Bad defense. Potential for a lot of upside from Stephon Diggs. The big play, the touchdown, all that good stuff. I do like him quite a bit. The guy who is intriguing here, though, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been kind of iffy when it comes to receiving yards. He's had a couple big games recently, but he was injured. He's banged up. There's a bit of a rough stretch for him. This could be another hard game for him against the Buffalo Bills defense that doesn't allow a ton of yards. We do have him projected, I believe, for a slight under, around 64, 65 yards. DraftKings does have his number all the way up at 76.5, so it is a little high. Prizepicks is a little bit lower, so they are projecting him to go a little bit under that main number. So it'll be interesting how this plays out because we're talking about a positive game script for Amon-Ra St. Brown, but if they key in on him, is he able to make the plays and get the yardage that we need? We know the receptions will probably be there because he catches a ton of passes, but he's got to get that yards after catch, and if they're really swarming to him on defense, it may be difficult for him to get there. I'd probably stay away from that line. I know a lot of people like that Gabe Davis over. Gabe Davis is back, y'all. He's back. He's making one-handed catches on the sidelines. He's catching touchdowns. He's going deep. Gabe Davis is back, 54.5. Everyone's all over Gabe Davis today. It's like one of the most bet-on props in the markets. So a lot of people are liking Gabe Davis. Where is he on my list? Why can't I find him? Gabe Davis. There he is. 66 yards is what the projection is. 59.5 on DraftKings, 54.5 on Prizepicks, so you are getting some value there. I do like the over on Gabe Davis, so kind of pairing Josh Allen, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, all over. Dawson Knox is interesting too, but I probably wouldn't go there from a receiving option. That's kind of how I would attack that game. We talked about Devin Singletary and his rush yards, how we kind of have him projected for an under. I think it's a fine spot, but I probably wouldn't touch Singletary in the receiving game. DeAndre Swift, I'm not doing it, man. Like, look at this instability. We don't know how many touches he's going to get. He had like 8 opportunities last game, like 5 carries, randomly scored a touchdown. He only had like 20 yards, caught a couple passes for 12 yards. Like, no, thank you. I'm going to stay away from DeAndre Swift because he can break a big play, but I'm not trying to bank on him at all. He's just an unpredictable asset, so I'm not really trying to target him. Saquon Barkley in the receiving game could be interesting. Again, in a negative game script for the New York Giants, but the Cowboys will be all over Saquon. You see he hasn't hit this number in 4 of the last 5 games, and even when he did go over, it's only 25 yards against Jacksonville, so not really liking this number at all. Let me see if I do have him. Saquon Barkley, we have him for around 26 yards, so slight over. I think that just has to do with the game script and what we project this game to play out like, but I'm not going near it. Then we go Tony Pollard, 21.5. This is one that I don't know. It's very reasonable. You know, you look at Tony Pollard, you're like, he had 100 yards last week. How the hell does he not do that this week? 21.5. On DK, it's 18.5. We have him projected for around 30. I think he can. Don't get me wrong. I think he can, but this would be pretty low on my priority list. I really like that Zeke fantasy score. I really like that Stephon Diggs receiving yards over. This would be a little bit lower on my list if I was to target Tony Pollard. We haven't projected for an over. I think it's a great spot for Pollard. I just don't know how much they're going to need him. You know, these rushing yards is already really high because they expect Zeke to run a lot. They expect Pollard to run a lot. How much they really need to throw. We're already talking about potentially a Dak under, so I'm not really all in there. Zeke, you don't talk about a guy who gets no receiving yards. Holy hell. Only 1 catch and 5 yards in 2 of the last 3 games. Is he going to go over in this one? Probably not. Probably not, unless he breaks one play. He's kind of like Nick Chubb at this point, where you see him, you're like, oh, is he going to get that 1 reception for that 8 yards and go over? And that's really what you're banking on from Zeke. He hasn't been overly involved, so it's not one I'd really touch a whole lot. But I do want to talk about Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz, I think, is in a great spot this week. Against Minnesota last week, he didn't do a lot, but in the previous 3 games before that, he had gone way over 37.5. The projection model does not like Schultz as much. He have him for 38 yards. But I think the big thing with Schultz is that the Giants have been allowing a lot of receiving yards to opposing tight ends. I believe they're in the top 5 in receiving yards allowed to tight ends. Brock Wright didn't have much of a game last week, but I think Dalton Schultz will be a guy that they do key in on and try to utilize him in this passing game, in the play action game, and that's where he's most deadly, right? You have CeeDee Lamb going deep, you have some Michael Gallup plays, and then you still have Dalton Schultz on that play action, the bootleg, that short area stuff where he can be effective, and he's pretty good after the catch as well. So I do think this is a great spot for Schultz if you want to take an over. I do really like it. The number is very, very low. Like, he's a guy who could easily get this in the first half, first quarter even, like 1 or 2 big plays, he's there. Then you look at CD, and you're like, oh boy, CD versus the Giants. Against Green Bay, 150. Against Chicago, 77. Against Detroit, 70. Against Philly, 63. And then last week, 45 versus Minnesota, again in a blowout. Not a whole lot you can take away from that blowout. Probably a more competitive game, probably a little bit more of CD in this one. I saw a lot of people on this one early. We have him projected. Where is my man CeeDee Lamb at? Let me see. Where did he go? Where did he go? There he is. Oh, 70 yards. See, this is the problem with the Cowboys, man. I just don't expect them to have to do a lot. And that's why I'm not really in on. I get it if you like CD, and I love CD. I think CD's awesome. But I just don't expect Dallas to have to do a lot to win this game. That offensive line for the Giants is really banged up. You see they're already projected to run for over 100 yards between their 2 running backs. Dak is kind of looking like he goes under, so you're banking on CeeDee Lamb having probably a 35 to 40% market share of the receiving yards, and that may be a lot. So if you think he gets like 75 yards, or you need 76 yards here, I'm not all the way there. This number started at 69.5. It's gone up since. I don't think I would target this one anymore. I think the value is kind of zapped out of it. But if you want to take the over, I don't hate it. You see he's been going over 3 of the last 5, so he's not in a bad spot. I probably wouldn't go all the way there, but there is some value to be had. If you want to go after Jacoby Myers, I don't hate it at all. Jacoby Myers will be the primary target. I think against Minnesota, he can take advantage of this defense a little bit. We'll see how that pass rush is, but he's going to be the main target for Mac Jones. He is every week. I think he will continue to be again this week. Ramondre Stevenson is interesting. We saw how much work he got in the receiving game last week because the running game did struggle. I don't think it'll struggle as much this time around, and Damian Harris did get more involved in the rushing game last week, so he will have to probably do his damage from a fantasy perspective in the receiving game. So I don't hate it. It's not a line that I'm really targeting, but I still, like I talked about, I do really like TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson at 45.5, I think is a really good line. You see, recently he's been struggling a little bit, but against Dallas, against Buffalo, I do think it was a tougher matchup for him. Now he gets the Patriots, some slower linebackers. We have him projected for around 49 yards, so it's a slight over, but I do think he will get involved. You talk about Jefferson and why we like him. Everyone loves Justin Jefferson, but the second target in this offense has been TJ Hawkinson. It's been Adam Thielen. You'll see some KJ Osborne, but really, when you think about it, TJ Hawkinson has been the guy who's really stepped up. In his first couple weeks, you see he had 70 yards, 60 yards. He was getting like 8 to 10 targets in those games. So I do think in a game that could be close, Hawkinson will be heavily involved because we talk about Jefferson getting doubled by this Patriots defense. He's going to see a lot of man coverage, and of course, he can beat that man coverage, but it may be similar to what we saw in that Eagles game, where in the Eagles game, he was being covered a lot. He got Darius Slay. He had safety over the top. It was very difficult for him to get loose. I think he may see similar things this week. He does have decent numbers against cover 1 and cover 3, which are the two primary coverages for the New England Patriots, but it will be how does Belichick scheme against Jefferson, because he knows that's the guy he's going to have to stop. That's why I think you will see good numbers from Dalvin Cook potentially, and I think TJ Hawkinson will be the primary beneficiary in the receiving game. So that's one that I would definitely be targeting. So you want to talk about some lines, kind of going over some things that I do like overall. I think the Hawkinson line is a great one. I do really like I talked about with Stephon Diggs, I really like his over. The Gabe Davis one, I think you can go with as well. It's another one that I do like. And then talking about the rushing players, I would probably target the Zeke fantasy score, if anything. I think 10.5 is just a little bit too low. I really like that one. Passing yards, Josh Allen would probably be an over for me if I was to go after anything, especially if I'm going after Gabe Davis and I'm going after Stephon Diggs. And then we're talking about Dak Prescott. I think I would probably go under for Dak Prescott. I'm not really there for that. So those are kind of the ones I'm looking at right now. Long video today, but wanted to give you a full breakdown of everything I'm looking at, just a little walkthrough. Had some time this morning. Wanted to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, but yeah, we're looking at TJ Hawkinson, more than 45.5, Stephon Diggs, more than 89.5, Gabe Davis, more than 54.5, Zeke Elliott, more than 10.5 fantasy score, Josh Allen, 285.5 passing, and Dak Prescott, less than 252.5 passing. That's kind of what I'm looking at today. This is what I like to see. And overall, thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy your Thanksgiving if you celebrate. If you don't, just enjoy your day off. Or if you're not celebrating Thanksgiving like I am, just enjoy your day. And as always, if you tail, give Prizepicks hell, and if we fail, do not bail. Let me know what you guys are playing in the comments. Make sure you drop me a like and subscribe for all the future content we put out. Have a good day, everyone. I know this was a long one. If you watched the whole thing, thank you, and I love you. I'm out. Peace.